You Are an Entrepreneur with Jacob Busani, episode 37. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and today is a bonus interview with a friend of mine, Jacob Busani. So Jacob and I met through a local networking group, and little did I know that he is an author of a book, and he coaches and mentors entrepreneurs, and we've had some great conversations. So I felt that he would be a great asset to you, the law firm owner, listening to this podcast. So Jacob Busani is a speaker, trainer, and coach with the John Maxwell Team. He is also the author of The Entrepreneurial Way. Jacob is a wonderful guy. He's got a great story, and it was a pleasure and an honor to bring him here on the podcast to share his wisdom and nuggets with you. Without further ado, I'm going to cue up that interview for you right now. So, Jacob, welcome to the show.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Moshe. It was great meeting you the other week at the networking event, and I'm glad and I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So let's start this off real easy. Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give my listeners a background of your history, who you are, and how you ended up becoming the author of The Entrepreneurial Way. And along your journey, you settled on something that's keeping you busy right now. And what is that?
Okay, so I started off, my first venture in entrepreneurship was most probably my father gave me the paving business at the age of 17. I was working with him since I was like 14, like part-times in the summer. I kind of, just got into the family business. Then 17, dad gives me the keys. He's like, you're good to go. You already know how to drive the truck. You know how to drive the trailer. You know how to manage workers. You know how to go get jobs. You know how to do sales. Go do it. And for the first 2 years, I have grown his business by double, just every year going after. Then the paving and seal coating business is a seasonal job. So I had to occupy myself with something in the winter. So I got into real estate. I've been involved in real estate on the commercial brokering and syndicating end of things. Up until about 2 years ago, I was in that full time besides the summers where I would do the paving business, where then I started getting into the personal development business completely by accident, where friends were just like, hey, you're always giving us advice and it works most of the time, and it doesn't work when we don't do it. So you should probably start coaching and speaking and stuff. And I was not really into that. So I kind of like tested the waters a little bit, different programs, until I found just the one that fit me. And that was the John Maxwell Team. I got certified. I did a few other programs. And I always had this thing that I needed to do was to write a book, mostly just for myself. And that is one of the reasons why I wrote The Entrepreneurial Way, where I have all these lessons where it's just for myself as a reminder. And I happen to wrote it in a format that anybody who does pick up the book can benefit from it greatly.
It's very interesting that your book came about through a need that you had to fulfill. And then you're like, you know what, I'm doing this. Why not do it for others? And I have a friend of mine, Alon David. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's created a product called the 90X Planner. The 90X Goal Planner is also born by the fruit of his own need to create a system to keep himself motivated towards his goals and keep on track. And you two have something in common. You didn't mention it, but I love your tagline. Born in Israel, made in Israel. You go ahead. What is the line?
Made in Israel, raised in New York.
Yeah, there you go. So made in Israel, raised in New York. He was also a native Israeli.
But it's interesting that, and I'm going to have him on the show. I'm very excited he's accepted, and we're going to bring him on here because that's something that I use and I have my clients use on a regular basis. But it's very interesting that sometimes the best ideas that we have are born out of our own need and just kind of comes to fruition. I even know attorneys who, they found a need within their own practice area, their own, the way that they were operating their firm, and ended up starting a separate business or leaving law in order to run a business where they created a software product or they created some other service that law firms needed because they needed it, and it wasn't being done in the marketplace. So I guess that's one of the ways that we can enter into entrepreneurship, is to recognize that there's something out there. So really neat to see how your book came about, that it wasn't, oh, I have to write a book and then you came up with how to do it, but really just, hey, this is my own journal, and you guys can pair inside of it. So I like that.
Thanks. It's definitely how it went.
Now, you also have your own podcast show as well. Is that correct?
Yes. So I actually have two podcasts. The first one is The Power Entrepreneur, where I interview successful entrepreneurs and business owners and ask them, for different advice. And that one we've already been doing for a year and change. I think we're already up to like our 70-something episode. And then I just restarted again the real estate podcast, which is called The Real Estater Show, where I interview rock stars in all aspects of the real estate business, up to 20 minutes, and just shoot for tips, advice, everything with just no fluff, just straight question answer.
Very cool. All right. So if you guys are interested in that, in either of those shows, go check them out. And the what is it? The Entrepreneurial Way?
No, the
Power Hour, the Power Hour, and the Real Estater Show. So
the Power Entrepreneur.
I screwed that up twice. So that takes talent. Here's a question for you. So some people natively, instinctively want to improve themselves. They get involved in self-help books. They're constantly reading, and that's one type of person. And then another type of person really doesn't recognize that there's a need to prove themselves, or they recognize it, but they don't really know where to get started. So as somebody who's in this field, in this industry, and helps people along their path, if somebody's brand new, they've never read a self-help book, they've never really dove into that space, is there a place that you would recommend that they get started? Should they start with reading a book? Should they start with listening to a specific podcast? Should they go to a meeting somewhere? What's the best place for somebody to start going down the road of self-improvement and growth?
So I think that's a great question that you touched up on. I come across, just like what you said, there are two types of people. There are the people who need personal growth and personal development to actually accelerate them. And then there are the other end of the spectrum where people, they don't think that they need it, or they just don't know where to get started. And my advice for that was always, everybody has a different poison that they like to listen to. Everybody has a different person who they connect with. So everybody has a different person who they connect with. For example, myself, I like John Maxwell. I'm a big John Maxweller. So I listen to all his things. I read all his books. I take all his programs. And then on the side, I also do like a bunch of other books, but he's like my main go-to. And I heard that you should always try to like find like one or two people who that's who you connect with and that's who you follow. And then everybody else is just like, okay, I can add that on. Because once you just start doing like everything and you just start reading like a bunch of different books, you kind of just like, it's like a whole like big Scrabble game where, oh, he says this and he says this and she says that and then they say this, and now it's just like, oh, now they're like conflicting each other, and then just like, okay, where do I go now?
Yeah,
so everybody has.
It's kind of like if you're on a weight loss journey and you start to implement all the diets at the same time, right?
Yeah, the no carbs, the water drinking one, the greens, of course.
Right. You're trying to have a green smoothie while intermittent fasting, while sticking to keto, while also on Atkins. It's kind of impossible to do it all. And they're all conflicting with each other. So you would have that in the self-help space as well, is what you're saying, that, different people have different advice, and they're not wrong. It's just that they can't necessarily be done at the same time, and it just will confuse the heck out of somebody. So you should choose one coach or one thought leader that you're following and just kind of consume everything that they have and really dive deep into that. So that's great advice, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I'd like to go down some of the key points in your book and just kind of touch on each of them. So at the beginning of your book, you start to talk about a person's mindset, growth versus fixed, which we kind of touched on just now. My understanding is that somebody with a growth mindset is seeking that self-improvement, and somebody with a fixed mindset, somebody who just believes that they are who they are and they can't grow. So we just touched on that, where, obviously the first step to becoming a better person is to recognize that you could be a better person and start seeking the help that you need. The next thing that you touch on in the book is the vision, where you talk about following your North Star. Talk to me a little bit about why the vision is so important and how that can translate into somebody who is struggling in getting their law firm to grow, where perhaps the vision might be the problem.
That's also another amazing question. A lot of people ask me, why can't I have the vision before the mindset? Or why can't I just write my goals down before I have the vision? And I specifically wrote the book in that order, where, first you have the mindset, then you have the vision. So for the law practicer to grow their law firm, when you don't have your North Star and you don't have your mind and vision on the same path, it's kind of like you can either take the bus to go to the grocery store or you can walk. It's all about what's going to get you there faster and what's going to be more convenient for you. You can get into your car, you can drive to the grocery store, that's the most convenient, or you can walk to the grocery store and that's going to take you a little bit longer, unless you live in like Brooklyn or Manhattan where you're just like walking down the stairs. But you get the analogy. So the vision is kind of the root, that this is what I want to be doing. This is the end vision. I see my law practice, a $10 million law practice in 2 or 3 or 5 years. And then there's all the details that surround with it. Is, I need to hire this amount of people. I need this amount of clients. I need to be charging this amount of money. Those are all the details. But the vision is, okay, I want my law practice to be this, in this place, serving those clients. Now, if you don't have your mindset on the same page, which is the growth mindset, then you're kind of always fixed. So let's say you're $1 million law practice right now. You're always thinking about, how many more clients can I get? That is called for like the fixed mindset. Whereas opposed to, okay, I need to change some things up. Maybe I can just have the same amount of clients, but they'll just pay me more money. That's the growth aspect of things. So when you're looking at the vision, that is kind of your handheld point, or, like the fishing line, where you have to reach the end of the line and it's there. You can see the line. It's moving from time to time. Sometimes you're going to catch it. Sometimes you won't catch it. But if you're not going to actively look to your North Star, like I say in the book, it's always going to be a path of up and down, yes and no, and maybe, and what, and but ifs. Whereas you have a vision, it's, okay, this is what I'm doing, and this is where I'm going, and this is what I need to be doing.
So if I understand correctly, the vision is the destination. And in your analogy with the bus versus the car versus walking to the grocery store, without the grocery store destination, then you'd just be getting into a car and driving around aimlessly, or you'd just be walking down the street and not know where you're going because you don't have that destination in mind. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay, so now help me with this. You make a differentiation in the book simply because you have different chapters on them between a vision and a goal. So help us understand the difference between the vision and a goal.
Okay, well, let me spin this back at you. What do you think a goal is?
So in my mind, a vision is kind of like the the perfect scenario of eventually this is what my business is going to look like, whereas a goal is a very specific short-term destination that we're trying to achieve that is a step closer to the vision, but not necessarily fulfillment of the vision. So for example, right now I'm preparing for a virtual conference for attorneys. So I have specific goals around that conference. I want to have a minimum of 10,000 attendees to that conference. That's a goal. My vision doesn't have anything to do with the conference. My vision is being able to have thousands of law firms that I've been able to change and effectuate change and help them grow. And now I've got this entire ecosystem of firm owners who are successful and able to build wealth through their law practice and now change the world in many different ways. So like my vision is the end product, whereas the goal is a short-term destination that I'm trying to achieve. That's my interpretation, but I'd like to see what yours is.
Okay, and that's great. So yes, the vision is the long-term picture. The goal is exactly those building blocks that help you get to it. And strategy is how you formulate your goals. But for me, for example, like my goals are not tied down to money, brick and mortar things. My goals are family and be able to do things that evolve around family. And some of those things are details. For example, money, right? Money, instead of being money a goal for me, money is a detail for me, where that way at the end of every day, I've always accomplished my goal, because at the end of the day, I'm always coming back home to my family and I'm always looking forward. And there's never that day where I'm not kind of fulfilled, where I don't have that self-fulfillment to just push me further and further and further for what I do.
Okay, very interesting. And what I find most interesting is that you've chosen a goal, for example, family, which I define as a core value, and you're now working everything around that in order to achieve that goal of family. So will this thing bring me one step closer to spending more time with my family or to having a better experience with my family? So very interesting spin and way of looking at goal setting. So that's intriguing, certainly. Another question that I have is you talk about passion and how important passion is as the armor of the goal. And I know that there are listeners to this show who when they started their firm, they were passionate about it. And today they might be a lot less passionate about it. It's kind of like when somebody first starts dating somebody, right? And the first few months, they can't see any negativity. Like it is like amazing and they're so passionate about it. But now come to them 5 years later, they're married and they, all of that initial passion is gone and they may not feel the same way about that relationship than they did in those first few months. Now, it's not to say that it's bad how they feel. Some people definitely have completely lost their passion and they need to either reignite that or separate from the marriage. So really where I'm going with this is, how does somebody who has lost his passion for his business determine whether there's a way to reignite that or, and become passionate about it again, versus realizing that, hey, I might have taken a wrong turn and I need to consider another direction?
That's also really another great question. So the way I view passion is like what you said, it's the armor. And then there's the other way of viewing it where passion is like gas for your car. You have to find a way to make whatever you do fun. And if whatever you're doing is not fun, sometimes we just have to do things just because we have to provide for our family. And yes, that's understandable. But, there's always has to be that limit. So instead of working like a 16-hour a day, I'm just doing something where there's zero passion, there is zero fun for you. You don't look forward to do it. What if you can limit that to 10 hours a day and then take that extra couple hours and focus on that, on doing something that you are passionate about, something that you could, provide, something that you could do something to make your future and your family's future or whoever's future you want to be better. So it's always about just finding what it is that you want to do, putting aside a little bit of time for it. If what you're currently doing, you are not enjoying, for example, like, yes, I'm sure there are many law firm owners that that are not passionate about what they do. Maybe it's the clientele that they're working with. Maybe they can go into another direction. But at the end of the day, you can't just pick up and just drop what you're doing and do something else. So that's why you do like micro steps into doing it, and then eventually it will formulate into something bigger.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, I'm going to turn it back around to our law firm owners and the way that I understand it for them. Is it's possible that when you started, you were very passionate about practicing your specific practice area of law, or you were passionate about some change that you can effectuate because of your deep involvement in that area. And now it's possible that you are facing the reality of the fact that a firm owner doesn't do a lot of law practice, and a firm owner has to be worried about hiring and firing employees and making sure your team is pulling cohesively in the same direction. You got to worry about the financials of the business. You got to worry about where the next clients are coming from. And suddenly you find that you're not doing any practice of law. And this could be the flip side also. Some people don't really enjoy the practice of law, and they really want to be a business operator, but they're stuck as a solo, and they're doing primarily the practice of law, and they want to be a business owner. So the way I understand this, the way you answer the question is, first you got to take stock with what is it that you're passionate about, what is it that you really enjoy, and when you figure that out, now you got to start making sure that you're very purposeful in earmarking some time to be spending on that. So if you've gotten lost in your ways as a firm owner and not practiced at all, maybe you need to bring in a office manager to take on a lot of those management tasks so you could become an attorney again that's practicing in your practice. Or the other way around, if you're a solo who is doing primarily the technical work of the practice of law, and you want to spend more time on managing and leading and doing those things, then maybe you need to start looking at hiring somebody to take on some of that technical work so that you could focus on the management and growth of your firm. Did I get that right?
I couldn't have said that any better.
Okay, great. And I appreciate you playing along with me here, because I know that some of these questions are not necessarily challenging what you're saying in the book, but I'm trying to connect the dots from chapter to chapter, where if somebody reads this book, they might have the same questions. So that's kind of the way that I'm approaching it. All right, so there's a couple of other key things that you cover in the book. One of them is decision making, one of them is consistency, and one of them is procrastination. And I kind of think that all three of those are related. I have my own ideas of how they are related, but I'd like you to try to spin those three together and explain why decision-making, consistency, and procrastination are related to each other, and what can we do about it to solve that problem for ourselves and continue growing in the right direction.
Okay, so I feel that so I'm gonna right now speak about myself on those three things. And we're gonna start off with decision making. All right, I believe the topic some of the biggest CEOs in the world, they limit their decisions to 3 decisions a day. Reason being is that decision making, especially huge decisions, burn a lot of calories, which waste a lot of energy, which then you need to refuel in however you do it. So decision making is a huge part of everyone's life. And procrastination, we all struggle with procrastination in some form or other with different things in our lives. Could be from picking up the phone, could be from just returning the phone call, it could be from just, switching the light bulb that your wife asked you 6 months ago. It could be whatever it is that you're procrastinating. And then consistency is I feel that consistency is the bloodline of the entrepreneur. Like when you're consistent, you're respected. When you're consistent, people actually notice that. And most of all, it's yourself. So for like the all-encompassing entrepreneur, and when you're trying to put this all together, when he has consistency, he doesn't procrastinate, and he knows how to make the right decisions, not always is every decision the right decisions, but as long as he bases his decision off of his intuition, he will feel a lot more better about it, and therefore it most likely will work, because you can't fight with your own intuition. That's key. consistency and procrastinations, those two definitely go hand in hand. So if you want to be that all-encompassing power entrepreneur and be on that way, you just have to be consistent, whether it's waking up on time. You can't procrastinate about it. You can't snooze the alarm, and you have to have the right decision where, yes, I want to wake up on time, and therefore I'm not gonna procrastinate, and I'm gonna be consistent about it.
Yeah, so interesting that you say that you should limit the quantity of decisions that you're making. You know, they say that that's why Steve Jobs was always wearing the same exact clothing every single day. He had, you know, the t-shirt and the jeans that he wore, and he never changed what he was wearing because he wanted to eliminate the decision of what to wear in the morning when he got dressed in the morning, because that decision would take away from his ability to make a decision later. So that's a key point. And the way that I see procrastination comes from one of two things, either from indecision. So you're not sure what decision to make, so you procrastinate altogether, right? And the other reason for procrastination is fear, which is what I want to touch on next with you. And that's, you know, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being successful, the fear of failing, the fear of, you know, what other people are going to think or say. That's the other reason for procrastination. But what procrastination does is it makes us not take action. So it actually negates our consistency. So if we look at the growth of, I mean, look at any of the large publicly traded companies, and their growth is not mind-boggling from quarter to quarter, but they take consistent steps in a positive direction, hopefully. Otherwise, their stock gets punished, right? So if their earnings per share went up a couple of pennies, then they're considered successful because they took that next step of consistent growth. Whereas if it went down, they now are showing inconsistency. They're, you know, and they'll get punished heavily. We need to do the same thing for our firm. We need to do the same thing in our lives, which is where we continue to take baby steps towards our growth. And that happens with consistency. The podcast is a perfect example. This is my second podcast. So I have a podcast out there called Dream Builder Financial. And that podcast I started, and I was inconsistent with it. I released a few episodes, I stopped. I waited a year. I released a few more episodes, and I stopped, and I haven't released episodes since. And obviously, you can now imagine and understand that podcast never got traction. Even though it's been sitting there in the libraries for people to find it for the last 3 years, I've already exceeded the number of downloads for that show from this show, because in the last 6 months, less than 6 months, we've released an episode every Tuesday, and we've released those bonus episodes on Thursdays. We've been very consistent with releasing episodes, and that's the key to people being interested in what you have to offer and purchasing it from you, or in this case, listening to my podcast, is because they know that they can expect the next step from you because you've demonstrated consistency. So lack of decision creates procrastination, which then removes your ability to be consistent. So, but I want to go back and talk to lack of decision making, where it's based in fear. So obviously, as somebody who is involved in self-development and personal growth, and also because you happen to have at least one chapter dedicated to fear, and I'm looking for the name of the chapter, but I can't find it right now. Failure, fear it, or embrace it is the first time I think that you talk about fear. But you'd actually talk about it a few times in your book. What I'd like to know is, Jacob, what is your take on fear and how people can overcome it?
Great. So fear is definitely a huge, huge part of our everyday life that we struggle with. Some people fear calling that person, doing the cold calling, because of fear of rejection, where fear of rejection is one of the 4 fatal fears. Some people are fear of the unknown. That's another fatal fear. Some people are just fear of, like what you said, also fear of being successful. when you make the decision to be successful, when you make the decision to make those phone calls, when you make the decision to go out with your wife once a week, this night, that's what you're doing it, or whatever decision you're making in life, or this is how I'm going to dress from now on. When you have a whole decision and you know why this decision is, fear is just an obstacle. Fear is not an option. It feels not a problem for you, because when you have a problem, that means that you have to go and the solution might be there and it might not be there, as opposed to when it's an obstacle. Obstacles are meant to overcome. When you have that whole decision, fear is just the obstacle. So the way I view it is, yes, fear actually fuels me to do things, because when I am scared of something, then I know, perfect. Okay, I'm scared to do this. I have a fear of doing this. This is a time for me, for my personal development, to get out of my comfort zone. And usually when I get out of my comfort zone, and when other people get out of their comfort zone, they grow. So it's kind of a win-win.
So I can tell you from my own personal experience that I struggle with being able to recognize that I'm having fear at the moment. In other words, I experience fear, which causes me to procrastinate, but being able to recognize that that fear is happening is part of the problem, because I understand everything that you just said, which is to realize that the fear is an obstacle. It's an opportunity for growth, and understanding that overcoming it is going to make you a better person. I mean, for example, if I were to go bungee jumping, which I haven't done, I imagine that standing on the top of the platform, looking down at the ground, which is very, very far below, I would have a fear of jumping. Now, what is that fear? That fear is just because of the possibilities. And if you think about it, they're pretty slim that any of those possibilities would happen. Like I slip out of the bungee cord, or the bungee cord snaps, so you're tied to something and it's going to keep you from hitting the ground, but yet you have that fear. So there, obviously, I'm very much aware of the fact that I have the fear, and it's easy to say, okay, if I take the step, that I'm overcoming this fear, I'm training myself and becoming to become a better person. So jumping out of a plane or a bungee cord, those are like examples where I can definitely see being able to do that. But how do I, in my day-to-day operations, how do I recognize that I'm operating from fear? How do I pinpoint that and say, hey, listen up, buddy. You're being fearful right now, and there's no reason for you to do that. And this is an opportunity for you to overcome that fear, push past it, and move, and become a better person.
I think that's a great question. I was never asked that before. So I feel that when it comes to the day-to-day, when something that you're procrastinating about might have to do with something that you're fearing. So let's say during the day you I don't know what your schedule is during the day, but let's say you go and you had to go do an errand. Okay, so instead of you doing that errand, you're like, I'm going to go get a couple more minutes of work and I'm going to do the errand later. As in, you might have that fear where, oh, if I'm not working full time, then I'm not really going to get to where I want to be, because doing the errand right now, it might be a priority, it might be a high priority, but then again, like work comes first. So that can be an option in during the day. Another way that you can see with what you might be fearful of is, what don't you like to do? If you don't like to do it, it might be because either you're scared of doing it, or either it doesn't make you comfortable in doing it. That can also be another thing. I feel maybe another way to do it is like giving over to giving time to other people. You might not see the exact like impact in it, or it might it might like make you uncomfortable. You're giving out to people like during the work, during your work time. That might be another fear where, oh, if I'm wasting time right now, then I'm gonna have to go and find more time. All these like little things that can possibly be a way of how you can, I guess, recognize fear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, I'm just going to recap. First, if I find that I'm procrastinating, then I should definitely look to see if this is fear-based. Second, if there's something that I don't enjoy doing or I think that I don't like doing, I should investigate to see if that is fear-based. And third, if there is something that I am seeing as a cost to my time and viewing as a waste of my time, I should start to look at that to see if that is fear-based as well. Did I get those right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so those are three great tips, because I don't know who else struggles with that, but I definitely have a hard time with when it's happening to recognize that it's happening and to I get the logic of overcoming the fear, and I can try to do that, but sometimes I just don't even realize I'm acting out of fear until way afterwards, or I never realized. So I hope that the answer to that question, thank you, Jacob, is helpful to some of our listeners. So let me take a bit of a different direction with you now, Jacob. If you had three key pieces of advice to a business owner that will help them with staying motivated, growing, really effectuating the change in themselves that they want to do, what are your top three nuggets of advice that you'd like to share with them?
So the nuggets of advice that I'm going to share are not my nuggets. Those are nuggets that I've gotten from other people that have helped myself. But first and foremost is always, as we all know, the people who you surround yourself by are who you end up being. So that's number one. Or just surround yourself with the people who you want to, who you aspire to be like, and who provide you a growth environment. That's one. The second one is everything you do with purpose. Be purposeful in everything that you're doing. Like even if it's the simplest thing, you're making a coffee, be purposeful. I'm making this coffee so I can drink, so it'll make me feel better, which will give me energy to do what I need to do today. Just like those little things being really take you a really long way. And I think the third thing is always keep the end in mind. Like, what am I doing all this for? What is everything that I'm doing for? And that also has to correlate with being purposeful. So I think two has to do with purpose and one has to do with who you surround yourself with.
I love all of those. So to recap, the first one is surround yourself with people who are at a higher level that you're trying to achieve, so that they will help elevate you. And my good friend John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire basically covers this in every single one of his episodes, where he says you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, or something along those lines. And it's not his line, it's from somebody else, and I'm not sure who, so I apologize for whoever I'm quoting it from and botching it, but basically that's the general idea. So making sure that you are associating yourself with the right people is number one. And drawing a blank on what number 2 was.
Number 2 was doing everything with purpose.
Right. So doing everything with purpose. And what I find interesting about this is your example of coffee, because when you brought up the example of coffee, you were giving an example of how coffee is helpful, and that's why you're doing it. And for me, somebody who drinks, I don't know, 8 cups of coffee a day, I probably drink too much coffee. So when I go to the coffee machine out of habit to brew the next cup, if I do it with purpose, I might say, hey, do I really need this next cup of coffee? Is this really the right piece of fuel to be putting into my body? Maybe I should be drinking water. And that is a way that I can maybe change a habit that is not a good habit for me into a better habit. So I saw the flip side of that, but took the same takeaway from you, which is that if we do things with purpose, very often we would cut out a lot of the things that we're doing. And we would be so much more productive because we would not be wasting our time on things that are not necessary. If every time we went to do something, we questioned, is this really the best thing for me to be doing right now? And it kind of goes hand in hand with the last thing that you shared, because the last thing that you shared, the great example that I have is from a book called Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. And in that book, they have you do an exercise where you write your own eulogy. And when you write your own eulogy, if you think about the power of that exercise, you're really looking at the end of your life, looking back and saying, what do I want to be known for? What did I do on this world? What do I want people to stand up there and talk about? And if you approach life from that perspective, then you will do a much better job of aiming in that direction. Whereas if you just kind of drift through life, and drift is another word that they came up with, which I mentioned on a previous podcast episode. But if you kind of drift through life and just let it happen, you'll end up somewhere totally different at the end of your life, and you'll end up being unhappy. There's so many stories of people who were on their deathbed and they were just very sad about what they, how they led their life and what they didn't accomplish. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like we all have the power of thinking about what is it that we want to be known for? What is it that what impact do we want to have on this world? And just make sure that we're heading in that direction. And hey, if running and owning a law firm is not part of that, then you should think about closing shop and doing something else. But if running and owning a law firm and being successful at it is definitely part of that, and a big piece of that, then you owe it to yourself to make sure that you do the damn best job you can in becoming the best, most successful law firm possible for you.
Wow.
So Jacob, this was really great. And I really enjoyed all the points in your book. And I enjoy the way that they're all connected to each other, kind of like not purposely, not that you don't tie the chapters together in the book, but they're definitely there in a specific order for a specific reason. And we covered a number of them here. And it was very clear that you have a purpose for the reason that they're in that order. So if anybody wants to check out the book, tell them where they can get The Entrepreneurial Way, how they can get their hands on it. And also let them know how they might be able to continue their journey with you if your message resonated with them, if they want to find out how to work with you directly.
Sure. So you can find the book on Amazon, The Entrepreneurial Way, or if you just type in my name, Jacob Busani, you can find it. And then I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, all under Jacob Busani. You can find me over there. Or if you want to shoot me an email, you can do that at info, I-N-F-O, at Jacob Busani. That's BUSANI.com. You can check out my website, JacobBusani.com, and you can just leave a request on there. And there's also a link for my calendar if you want to have a quick chat. And thank you very much, Moshe, for having me on your podcast.
Oh, you're welcome, but you're not done yet. I'm going to throw you a curveball. I want to leave with one last question. So I gave you that plug there, and everybody can go and check you out and definitely pick up your book. Last question for you. What is your definition of work, life, and family balance?
Wow. There is no balance. It all has to be symmetrically connected. You have time for work and you have time for family. So if your family is not high priority, then your work is not going to be high priority. So something has to be high priority, and I hope it's family, and then everything has to be revolved around it. That's the way I look at it.
Very interesting take, and I knew there was a reason I asked you that question. Would definitely get a different response than what people would expect. So definitely, it's an interesting perspective that if you don't prioritize one, you're not going to prioritize any. They kind of all go hand in hand. So love the conversation, Jacob. Thank you so much for being here on the show. And I encourage everybody to check out the book, The Entrepreneurial Way, on Amazon. And until next time, let's keep growing. Let's keep making ourselves better, making the firms better, and making them profitable so that we can impact the world and impact ourselves, our families, and future generations.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Moshe.
This week's episode of the Profit with Law podcast has ended, but your growth journey doesn't have to stop here. Head over to profitwithlaw.com/grow, where you can download the Firm Differentiator 10X System Toolkit entirely free. In this toolkit, I share the details of my system being used to grow firms to extreme profitability. That's profitwithlaw.com/grow. Until the next time, remember, a law practice is not for practice, it's for profit.